Is Mass Effect 4 in danger of being abandoned or flat out even cancelled just because BioWare for the last 10, 15 years have been nothing but incompetent slop pushers? Honestly, you know what? Hot take. But I think that is for the best, probably. Because judging by what they did with the ending of Mass Effect 3 and Andromeda and Dragon Age Veilguard, I don't think there's a lot of hope in Mass Effect 4 being even remotely a decent game. Not even a good game, but I don't think it has even a shot with modern BioWare to be even a semi-almost decent game.
BioWare just can't catch a break. If it's not EA breathing down their neck, it's ex-employees running to Blue Sky to express their resentment, and now running to Jason Schreier. In a recent article,
We can probably gauge how good a developer is purely based on their Blue Skies account at this point.
he breaks down his reasoning as to why Dragon Age the Veilguard failed, and no, he does not believe the wokeness had anything to do with it.
Of course, Jason Schreier doesn't believe that because these people can't even admit that woke is a real thing, that it's a real and serious issue. Like, look at this. This is woke right in front of you. Look at those giant arms, those hippo nostrils, that chin. That's my girl right there. Ah, yes. I mean, woke can't even mention this, okay? It's a problem. If you can't speak about something, that's a problem.
Ultimately believe that the developers should get freedom to make what they need to make. We see that freedom paying off with games like Expedition 33, where the yoke of Ubisoft have developed something wonderful once they escaped the shell. But in this case, BioWare's division is not something that sits right with me. And I don't think it's going to sit right with you either. Veilguard was reviewed well by critics, but ultimately only reached 1.5 million players by.
That's the reason why we never care about critics and only the user score ever matters. The critics can go eat a, well, whatever they want to eat, a turd, I guess.
January 2025. EA saw this as not resonating with a broad enough audience in a highly competitive market. This is all according to CEO Andrew Wilson. This led to layoffs at BioWare. Jason claimed he interviewed nearly 24 people who worked on Veilguard, and they cited several reasons behind its failure, including marketing misfires, poor word of mouth, and a 10-year gap.
There's a bird trying to get through my window and I have a mosquito net in front. Oh, he went away. That was strange.
Between
Not still a better story than whatever BioWare cooks up, by the way.
the previous title. Their biggest claim though was the game rebooted from a single player game to a multiplayer and then back again, which muddled development and inflated the title's budget, which set unrealistic sales expectations from EA. Now note,
Listen, it doesn't matter what their sales expectations were or should have been. Oh, by the way, this is a lie. From a financial point of view, I can assure you that that is 100% a lie. Because we are talking about a AAA modern day development, which probably cost them roughly 500 million, if not 600 million, which is not actually that above average when it comes to AAA developments in general. So, in the budget department, they're actually exactly where they need to be. Second of all, we're talking about a franchise that historically easily attracted 10 million people, maybe 15 million people if you're doing a good job. And now it's not even selling 1.5 million copies. I'm sorry, but that is not that is not an issue of leadership or whatever. That's just you being in general bad. These claims that that Dragon Age was ruined by the fact that it wanted to be single player and multiplayer, that didn't ruin anything. Tell me, please, tell me, the BioWare Dragon Age slop defenders. How exactly does single player or multiplayer impact the fact that the skills in this game were boring, the items in this game were boring, the level ups in this game were boring? It doesn't matter if it's single player, multiplayer, or they switch 5 times over to each other. The fact that item stats are dog shit in this game It's not an issue of that. That's just poor. That's just poor development at its core.
None of these reasons are claiming responsibility for the failure onto themselves. This will come into play soon. In my opinion, the title's marketing was an absolute misfire. With the reveal trailer, the audience was led to believe that Dragon Age had been turned into a freemium mass market title trying to capitalize on Fortnite's success.
I love the fact that we even have crippled representation in the black girl.
Word of mouth was definitely not the issue. It in fact
I
had
but this is just peak modern dayism.
on
Look,
Fortnite's success. Word of mouth was
look. They literally make it visible that she's a cripple. Yes, they make an effort to make you know that she's a cripple.
definitely not the issue. It in fact had plenty of word of mouth. It was just not the word EA wanted. Also, a 10-year gap serves to drum up interest. Just look at how much attention Duke Nukem Forever received, even
Yeah.
though it was a terrible game. Unrealistic sales expectations would hurt EA's perception of the title's release, but I'm not convinced the muddled development was entirely EA's fault, as not a single staff member or Jason has cited one of the reasons of the game's failure to be a lack of audience understanding, which, like it or not, definitely contributed to the game's downfall. Let's continue. In 2017, Mike Laidlaw
Oh no, the audience didn't want to eat slop. How dare they, evil people?
informed his colleagues over some expensive bottles of whiskey that the next Dragon Age would be pivoting to an online live service game, a decision that he disagreed with. This meant he would be resigning from the studio, which was a big loss. This was apparently the first major blow to Veilguard's development. I wish that pivot had never occurred, Dara would later recount on YouTube. EA said, make this a live service. We said, we don't know how to do that. We should basically start the project over. Former art director Matt Goldman replaced Laidlaw as creative director, and with a tiny team began pushing ahead on a new multiplayer version of Dragon Age, codenamed Morrison, while everyone else helped finish Anthem, which was struggling to coalesce. Goldman pushed for a pulpy, more lighthearted
Anthem was struggling to coalesce is not even the story. Anthem was literally made in the last 6 months before the release. That's the reality of Anthem. It was that bad.
tone than previous entries, which suited an online game, but was a drastic departure from the dark, dynamic stories that fans loved in the fantasy series. This, in my opinion, was the nail in the coffin. People knew Dragon Age as a dark, gritty series, even though that grit had been lightened
True, and they made it into an absolute joke and comedy series that no one even finds comedic.
incrementally over the sequels. This final push led to what we see now, something that simply does not look like the Dragon Age most remember. While the previous games in the franchise had fractured tactical combat, this one would be all action. Instead of
Dude, they literally said this, by the way, and no one mentions this any longer, but they literally came out and said, oh, we want a modern audience. We want a new audience. Dragon Age needs to go forward, which means they need to switch up their audiences. The old fans that made this franchise successful and sell 10 million copies, year one, yeah, FM. Like, how stupid do you need to be?
quests that players would
And this is probably what they're gonna do with Mass Effect, which is the best part.
only experience once, it would be full
Listen. The fact that you had gender transitions in a fantasy game of the medieval times, what do you think modern day BioWare is gonna put in Mass Effect 4 in the future, where all of those things are more likely?
of missions that could be replayed repeatedly with friends and strangers. Important characters couldn't die because they had to persist for multiple players across never-ending gameplay. As the game evolved over the next 2 years, the failure of Anthem
By the way, I also hate this way that this is contextualized. Multiple characters could not die because they were important to the story. And does that make all of the decisions you put into this game as makeable by the player bad an excuse? No. Like these people are trying to find dumb excuse like this. Oh, since characters couldn't die, all of the dialogue in the game needed to be bad. Shut up. No, that's not even remotely true. No. Okay, characters can't die. Sure, that takes away from the story. That's true. But how does that impact literally all of the dialogue choices being bad and stupid?
Hovered over the studio. Were they making the same mistakes? Some BioWare employees scoffed that they were simply building Anthem with dragons. It wasn't until 3 years later, 2020, with the pandemic's disruption, that Hudson and Dara resigned. The new studio head, Gary McKay, then revealed Dragon Age would no longer be multiplayer. This would be great news, but it came with a catch. The studio would only be given a year and a half to finish. They had to pivot from an all-multiplayer game and recast the entire story. This strict deadline became a reoccurring problem. The development team would make decisions believing they had less than a year to release the game, which severely limited the stories they could tell and the world they could build. Then the title would be inevitably delayed a few months, at which point they'd be stuck with those old decisions with no chance to stop and re-evaluate what was working. 2 years later, 2022, the studio started distributing an alpha build to playtesters. The reactions were concerning. The biggest problem was said to be a lack of satisfying choices and consequences. Previous BioWare titles had presented players with gut-wrenching decisions, which allies to save, which factions to spare, which enemies to slay. Such
Okay, how can you make a choices in a game that's fundamentally garbage? And I mean this seriously. Okay, one of the first things that happens in Dragon Age Veilguard is you get into the city, and this actually was at the start of the video. There was the spotlight, right here actually. Yeah.
by
Look.
January 2025.
Okay, so this is one of the first things that happens in the game, and you have already been playing the game for a little bit of a time, and then you get to this city, and it's like I have no idea who the bad people are. Is the city not our allies? It technically kind of is. So the authorities of the city trying to take this woman away is bad. Why exactly? Like what? And none of it makes sense. It's like, okay, here's a cartoonishly stupid way to to introduce a villain that doesn't even honestly get introduced properly. It's just like here's bad guys, and they're bad. Why? Because they're arresting this woman. Why? Because nobody knows. And it's like, okay, your choices are do nothing, save her, bro. What? What do you mean? What? Why would I save her? I have no idea if she's good or not. Maybe she's a baby murderer or something like that. None of this crap makes sense. And that's the whole game. Honestly, that's the whole game.
Such dilemmas made fans feel like they were shaping the narrative. Historically, a big draw for BioWare games. In 2023, to help finish Dragon Age, BioWare brought in a second internal team, which was working on the next Mass Effect game. For decades, there'd been tension between the two well-established camps, known for their starkly divergent ways of doing things.
Wait, people are acting if this like this is something new. This is not new. We already knew this. We know since the previous CEO of 2017 left. He came out and said, "Oh yeah, BioWare prioritizes Mass Effect over Dragon Age." Yeah, we knew this. This is nothing new.
BioWare developers like to joke that the Dragon Age crew was like a pirate ship, meandering and sometimes traveling off course but eventually reaching port. In contrast, the Mass Effect group was called the USS Enterprise after the Star Trek ship because commands were issued straight down from the top and executed zealously. As the Mass Effect directors took control, they scoffed that the Dragon Age squad had been doing a shoddy job and began excluding their leaders from pivotal meetings. According to people apparently familiar with the
Technically based, because I mean, obviously, why would you want the girl with the big arms and a large nostril? Hilarious. Anyway, yeah, I mean, the Mass Effect theme sounds better in general, but I mean, again, it's modern day BioWare. The Mass Effect. So think of it this way. So the Mass Effect team took over Dragon Age, and they still made it into complete shit. Does that sound like inspiration for you? And then the talent from the Dragon Age series is now working at the Mass Effect series. I don't know about you, but that does not inspire anything good in my eyes.
Internal friction, over time, the Mass Effect team went on to overhaul parts of the game and design a number of additional scenes, including a rich, emotional finale that players loved. But even changes that appeared
Did
to
they?
improve the game stoked the simmering rancor inside BioWare, infuriating Dragon Age leaders who had been told they didn't have the budget for such big, ambitious swings. Now, let's take a second to discuss because this is important. It is written from the perspective of those who were disrupted. And though I don't dismiss their concerns, as someone who was a director of many departments in my tenure, I can tell you that this reads to me as if the Mass Effect team came in, saw a mismanaged, struggling team, and did their best to fix and improve things.
Well, to be fair, that's what literally is written there. You kind of don't have to really guess. It's written black on white that that's exactly what happened. It's not a mystery.
Removing those disenchanted or not willing to compromise. It is no secret that the best parts of Veilguard are the parts that the Mass Effect team worked on, including the choice-filled conclusion and all the major story beats. You can see Mass Effect's influences in places like the gear system as well, which was fantastic.
Okay. That's just Omega Cope. That is just coping up the wazoo, okay? If the Mass Effect team is so good, why was Mass Effect 3 trash in most people's eyes? And why was Andromeda a complete disaster? Okay? If that team is so good, how did that even happen? Okay? Let's cut with the crap. None of any part of Dragon Age Veilguard was good.
In my opinion, being told you don't have the budget for such ambitious swings would really hamper you. But I thought they just said that the Mass Effect team was the USS Enterprise just doing whatever they're told. It seems to me like they are the USS Enterprise doing what it takes to finish their mission, even if that means pushing back on EA and demanding more budget. Now, my next statements are going to be divisive, but bear with it. Imagine listening to the previous director telling you that it is essential that their trans character get maximum unskippable screen time. What would you do? You know you have
You say based and then you Minecraft.
other areas to focus on. You know you have a job to do to make this reach a wider audience.
By the way, the trans character we're talking about is Tosh, and it's a self-insert if you can't figure that out.
Dragon Age had such a tight deadline. Why did
The whole of Dragon Age, especially Tasha's character, was literally just emotional dumping. It's just a giant, what's it called? Emotional session of letting go or something like that. It's just stupid.
Tash gets so much
Drama dumping. There we go.
focus and screen time? 20% of the game involved her and her
Good.
problems. If they had enough time to make a story about mummy issues, which is unnecessary to the world-ending storyline, but not enough time to add meaningful choices, perhaps things were tough because of bad leadership, not because of EA. Imagine the Mass Effect leadership having to come in and fix all of these problems after they're dragged away from their development project, which would push out the release date and cause issues internally for them. What we don't see is Mass Effect's leadership addressing these comments. Michael Gambel, in fact, was the biggest champion of Veilguard, taking to social media to really sell the title. Not once did he mention problems at BioWare. I'm not saying the Dragon Age leadership was pointing fingers and blaming everyone but themselves, because clearly they had struggles with development and EA, but they certainly don't show me the professionalism that I'd expect from leadership, and perhaps maybe there was a slight bit of incompetency when it came to business practices.
I absolutely did. I hate these videos which just lambasts leadership as the worst thing ever. There are things that leadership is bad at, but again, I don't know how many times, honestly, I have to say this. Okay, listen. Leadership doesn't even know how the inventory system looks. Leadership has no idea about the stats and items in the game, or about the talent tree in the game. Leadership has no idea about any of these things, and fundamentally, that's complete garbage. Leadership has no idea that you have only 3 enemy types in the game. Leadership has no idea that they're damage sponges most of the time. No one in leadership knows these things. And yet, these are core fundamental things that are wrong with the game. Stop trying to blame leadership because they don't even know what any of that does. It's the people making this crap who were stupid enough to make it in the first place, not leadership who ruined that part of the game. Okay? Blame leadership for things that leadership need to be blamed on. Bad timing, bad practices, overtime, and all of those things. But don't blame them for inventory management when none of them even know that the game has an inventory system.
I want to emphasize that I'm not a fan of the divisive language used, but I'm a firm believer in supporting developers and giving them time to work their magic without extreme oversight. There are
Magic.
many victims in what's happened here, and I'm in no way trying to wipe EA's hands clean. Veilguard would have been an entirely different game had BioWare known they were getting 4+ years rather than the 1.5 they were told. You can chastise me for those comments, but you have to understand that going to journalists and throwing your team under the bus doesn't establish a lot of trust. And I know my audience agrees with me there. Here's another example from David Gator. It always seemed that when the Mass Effect team made its demands in meetings with EA regarding the resources it needed, it got its way. But Dragon Age always had to fight against the headwinds. Once again, I thought they were just executing commands, but now it seems as though they were, in fact, making demands and pushing EA for more, something I feel like Dragon Age development teams just weren't doing strong enough. If you're not selling what you need well enough, you might struggle to get what you need. But if someone else can sell, if they can get what they need, this is a gift you cannot blame them for, especially when this Mass Effect team is not the one telling the public they're getting the game done. They're helping you finish your game with this gift. They didn't claim any credit at all. So
That's also kind of true. Irrelevant, honestly, but true.
why are they the enemy? It just seems like the Dragon Age team.
Well, when everyone is bad and there's no one good, it's a blame game. That's what it is fundamentally at the end of the day. If there's nothing good to talk about, well, you just kind of have to blame each other until something happens, I guess. And that's the whole debacle here. And this is why Mass Effect 4 will never succeed. Because it's the same garbage. Okay? And again, the people who made Dragon Age the Veilguard bad are now working at Mass Effect. And the people who made Dragon Age Veilguard good are still fucking working at Mass Effect 4. So, it's a lost-loss situation. At this point, I'm just campaigning about Mass Effect 4 being cancelled, BioWare sold for parts, and someone else taking over, someone else hopefully who has brains, and, well, then we can just see what happens. Because Mass Effect 4 getting scrapped and start over again is, a delay of what, 2 years maybe, 3 years? But Mass Effect coming out, being complete absolute dog water garbage that is being played by maybe 50k people on Steam, and then a bunch of articles coming out and saying, oh, this is another massive success for BioWare! A return to form! No. And then we have to wait 10 more years for Mass Effect 5, and at which that point, everyone's going to forget the Mass Effect franchise even exists. I mean, I take just wait those 2 years until everyone gets fired and new people can start working on it. But I mean, it is what it is. Anyway, 10 out of 10. That was Dantix. Bye.